computer. Okay. Is it recording? Yeah. All right. So we started a little bit of Siman Kuf, and we looked at some of the early sources, the early sources, the sources, and I want to continue with that. And then I guess I'll probably just jump straight to the Shulchan Aruch just because of time. But if you have the page that I sent out, we're in source number 6, which is Ha'ochel Megid HaNashe, and that's page Sadi Zayin Amud Aleph and Amud Bet in Chulin. If you have a Chulin, and it's a short piece here. I think we didn't read this last time, right? Isn't that right? Anyway, all right. So here, maybe Raphael, you want to read just the beginning here? Amar Shmuel Lo Asra Torah Ela Sha'al Kaf.
Just a second, I'm opening it.
Yeah.
Just a second. Yes.
So wait, let me review. The earlier sources that we saw were, let's say, in Makot, and we saw the Machlokes of the Chachamim and the Rabbi Shimon about whether wheat is a birya, and then there was and then we brought an example of I think of a Namala. What we talked about in Chulin Daf Kuf Kuf Bet, we saw that Amar Rav Achal Tzipor Tahor B'chayeha Kolshehu B'mitata B'kazayit. So if you eat it whole while it's alive, then even if it's very small, you're still chayav b'kolshehu. U'b'mitata kazayit. But if it's dead, it's a nevela, you need a whole kazayit. And then we said a bird that's tameh, when it's alive or dead, it's in any amount. In other words, because it would be eating a behemoth or whatever, a of tameh, even if it's very small, it's still eating of tameh. That's kind of it. Levi, can you turn that off, please? Okay, so now we have another example here with Gida Nashe. So Raphael, why don't you read that?
Yes. האוכל מגיד הנשה, אומר שמואל לא אסרה תורה, אלא שעל הכף בלבד, שנאמר על כף הירך. אומר הפאפה, אכלו ואין בו כזית חייב.
No, אמר הפאפה כתנאי.
כתנאי. אכלו ואין בו כזית חייב. רבי יהודה אומר עד שיהיה בו כזית. מייתמא דרבנן בריאה בפני עצמה היא.
Okay, so that's all we're going to read. So let's go back.
So we have the basic definition of Gida Noshe. That is this part of the Shmuel defines what's Gida Noshe Deraisa. Meaning the Rabbanan we may say that
the Gid maybe extends past the kaf, the socket of the top part of the thigh, but it's only the part that's in the top part of the thigh that's called Gida Nashe. That's the way I understand it.
Yeah, midiraisa. Lo asrat Torah.
Yeah.
Even though we do nikul for everything.
Okay, fair enough.
Amar Papa ketanai. Meaning,
so he says this statement is not universally agreed upon. Well, he's going to say, he's going to see. Or ketanai. It's like a Tanaitic argument.
Yes, it is. It is like it is part of a. This part should be quite small, and it might not have kazait inside it. Like it might not subsist of kazait.
Right.
That's achaloven bo kazait chayav. Tanakama says that even if it doesn't have kazait, if you eat, the Gemara understands that if you eat the whole of it, you have here, even though it's not kazait. Rav Yehuda Omer shebo kazait. Ma'itama derabon, meaning what The Rabbanon here are.
The Rabbanan say you need to eat, if you eat it, you're chayiv, even if it's not fully a kazayit. And Rabbi Yehuda says, no, you have to eat a kazayit, because after all, it's not called eating if you don't eat a kazayit. So you didn't eat enough if you didn't eat a kazayit. So now it says, what is the reason for the Rabbanan that they say you don't need a kazayit? And they
Yes, the reason
say, because it's a
they
birya. Oh, by the way, I was thinking about this birya, why you pronounce it, how you pronounce it. There's a shva underneath the bet, and then there's a dagesh in the bet. So it's not bria. That would be a shva na. I'm sorry, shva nach, but it's a shva na because it has a dagesh in the bet. So therefore, it's not bria, it's bria or buria. So in Ashkenazim turned bria into bria, into biria. But it's not, it's sort of like an evolution of the expression. So the correct Hebrew pronunciation would be biria, but not bria, biria, but not biria, sort of in the middle. Biria,
It's
biria.
Lishon Bori. It's like it's wholesome. It's like Bori Veshema.
No, I think it's from the word creation.
No, because it doesn't have an aleph.
I think the
I'm
aleph,
pretty
according to
sure.
the rules of diktuk, and can fall away. No, I thought it.
Oh, really? Okay, I always understood it like it's whole, like Bori.
No. I think it's from the word creation. But anyway, go ahead. So the rabbis say it's a biriyah, and therefore you don't need a kazayit. So we're basically getting like these kinds of lists of things that are or are not a biriyah, and the oaf tameh is, the oaf tahor isn't, the giranashe is, a namala, obviously an ant is, a wheat isn't. So we're trying to figure out what the definition is. So I want to read, I'll take the next source, which is the Tosfot. The Tosfot, I think it's on that Sadi Zion Amud Aleph or Amud Bet, and it starts my time at the Rabbanan, Biriyahi. It's on that last piece. I guess it's Sadi. I'm not sure. It's do have it with an Aleph. Thank you, Sarah. So you could have it with an Aleph, yeah. And I think the rules of diktuk, a lot of times Aleph turns into a Hey. Anyway, like karate, karate just right here. Anyway, so let's look at this Tosfot. Does everyone have the Tosfot? Got the Tosfot? Aaron, you got the Tosfot? Jacob, great. All right, so look at the Tosfot. My time, I'll read it, so be patient with me. My time at the Rabbanan Biriyahi. So the rabbis consider Gida Nashe Biriya. Ubesof Pirkid, at the end of our chapter, which is Daf Kufbet, Nami Arinan Ki Hai Gavna. We say a similar thing, Achal Tzipor Tahor Bechaya. That's our other example that we saw. You ate let's say a chicken, a kosher bird, Bechaya, and when it's alive, Bekolshu. Umitata Bekazayit. But when it's dead, it's in a kazayit. Achal Tzipor Tameh, Bein Bechaya, Bein Bemitata, Bekolshu. So that's a similar case. And now he's going to explain why is that the cause. The Aver Menachai Va'of Tameh Chashiv Lehu Biria. Because if it's a live bird, then it's Aver Menachai. And that's a Biria. And if it's a Tameh bird, then it's also a Biria. But not a Nevela. In other words, not a Tahor bird that's dead. Ve'im Tomar Ma'ishna Dever Menachai Va'of Tameh V'gid V'sheretz and gid, which is also, and sheretz, which is also chashivet fei biria, that they are considered biria or biria. Min nevela. Why nevela? Not nevela tahora b'mitata b'kazayit, that you need to have a kazayit. So why is it that a nevela, in other words, a dead bird, a kosher bird, requires a zayit? V'lo chashivet biria. Why is not considered biria? V'ken tevel, and why tevel also lo chashivi le rabbanan biria b'makot in Masechet Makot, and that was that machloket of Rabbi Siman. V'yesh lomar and here's an answer. Now, this Tosfos, by the way, is not brought in the Beit Yosef, but he does bring the Rosh and the Ran, which we're going to also see. But this Tosfos is sort of like how do you say, a spoiler alert? In other words, this Tosfos sort of gives you all the goods right here, I think. But it's the earlier source, so we should really see it first. Yesh lomar dahainu time. This is the reason. Dahani ki amar Rachmana lo tochal gid velo tochal of tamei v'ken ever menachai keilu piresh ben gadol ben katan dekulu mikre gid va'of ubivad shiyu shleimim. So wait, so what did he say here? Can somebody tell me what he said here? Again,
because
he says,
the Torah says lo tochal, that means anything, any amount, like b'mashehu.
right. In other words, it's the Torah specified specifically. It said, don't eat a aver menachai. It didn't say don't eat a kazayit of aver menachai. It said don't eat aver menachai. It specified this particular thing. So this thing is now going to be usher in any size. And also don't eat an of tameh. Aval nevela chaticha nami mashma nevela. But nevela, also a piece is all called a nevela. So when the Torah said don't eat nevela, there's no thing that is a nevela, and that even though it's small, is still a nevela. In other words, there's no thing that's a nevela, is what he's saying. In other words, a bird is still a bird. It's a bird. So the Torah prohibited bird. But really what the Torah prohibited is not nevela. It prohibited an animal which is a nevela. It's kind of like an adjective. An animal which is the quality of being a nevela. But it's not a particular thing that it prohibited. It's not a particular animal or a particular item. It's any animal that is in the category that became a nevela by its not being shechted properly. V'ken tevel. And tevel too. The Torah didn't prohibit, wheat. It prohibited tevel, but as a quality of wheat. Some wheat is tevel, and some wheat isn't tevel. De'i have kativ al tochal chita shel tevel. If the Torah would have said, "Don't eat a grain of tevel," then it would have been as have chashiva birya. Then it would have been birya, because the Torah would have jumped out and said to us, "Don't eat that piece. Don't eat a piece." But the Torah didn't say that. The Torah said, "Don't eat tevel." So tevel, so tevel, could be a lot, could be a little. What's the amount? We don't know. So we're going to go by our standard measure of a kazayit. V'ken mashma perak shlishi d'shavuos de ka'amar heichan matzino ba'ochel kol shehu shechayev. So
Rav Nachum, you paused there for a minute, so I think we missed. I think you were probably still reading the Tosfot, but I'm not sure. We didn't hear.
Yeah, I just kept going in the Tosfot. So the Tosfot quotes in Shavuos that how could you ever have a case of being chayiv on kol shehu? Normally, you're chayiv on a zayit. How could you be chayiv on a kol shehu? And the Gemara asks later, velo hare. Velo, it doesn't really say velo. Hare mifarish. So it says, what about a person who is mifarish? So what does mifarish mean? It means you say, I am not going to eat any amount of wine. So if you eat any amount of wine, now you're chayiv, because you said that specifically. Perush shavua shelo ochal kol shehu. In other words, if a person, the Gemara means to say, when it says harei mefarish, it means to say a person who made a shavua that he's not going to eat any amount of grape juice. So then we have a case of a person who would be chayiv even on less than a kazayit. Umishane mefarish nami kibirya dami. And the Gemara then says that mefarish is like a birya. So from this, Tosfos learns backwards that a birya is like mefarish. Why am I so? Yeah. In other words, a birya is a case of a person of the Torah essentially being mefarish. The Torah said, don't eat a nevela. I mean, not a bad example. Don't eat a tamei bird. Don't eat a gida nashe. So don't eat aver minachai. So it's almost like, so if we ask the question, according to Tosfos, how do we know that birya is usher at all? we could ask a fundamental question. How do we know that a birya is usher? That even an amala is usher, that eating an ant is usher. How do we know birya? It doesn't say anywhere in the Torah a din called a birya. So how does Tosfos explain that we do know from the Torah that there's a din of birya?
Is it actually a Din Torah though? I mean, that's like a weird thing to say there. It's like an asmachta in that sense, right?
No, it's not an asmachta. It's a din Torah. You're going to get in Makot. We learned you're going to get.
Certain asul
that you're-
things can. It's like a quality that certain isulim can have. It's not nothing. Nothing is. Like there's nothing. Like you can eat a whole.
If you eat ground
Like
up,
you can
it
eat
says-
a whole fish. That's not a problem.
There's a discussion in the Gemara about like a person who eats ground up ants and then one ant in it. And one
But
whole
we end
ant. And he's
We end up
high.
saying it's not a Dean Torah, though,
Yeah.
So it's not in the
right?
Torah.
Like we end up saying that, like, I mean, you could say there's something about a status of Birya that's like Doraita, but the Beetle status is
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Rabbanan. But I
Sorry.
feel
So let
like the
me-
whole point of Birya is the Batel thing, right? That's the whole significance
no,
to
no,
us.
there's
is the
2
fact of
points
it not
to it.
being Batel.
No,
It's
in
the kol
our-
shehu,
okay,
kol
yeah, so
shehu and the beetle.
You're
is what
both.
saying.
Everybody is
Yeah.
right, but there's 2 things going on
Yeah.
here. There's 2 things going on here. The din that we have to start like, I mean, just to straighten it all out. There's the Torah comes along and says there's this din of birya which applies to certain things, and then if you eat, let's say, an ant, you get whipping midoraita, and if you eat a whole bird or a gidanashe, you get whipping midoraita. That's a din of birya, nothing to do with bittul. Now came along the rabbis and said, well, if a birya falls into 3 other things, and I don't know which 3 other gidim, and I don't know which is gid anashe and which is a regular gid, and it's batal really. It's batal barov. Really, it should be batal barov. The din Torah would be it's batal barov, because even though even eating that small gid would be asur doraita, it would be batal now because we go off to holchin acharov, especially in yavesh b'yavesh. So then the rabbis came along and said, no, we're going to make a din called birya is not batal. So that din is the Rabbanan. But the essence of the din that we learned in Makot, that was the point of the Gemara in Makot. The essence of the din in Makot is discussing that you're going to get whipped midoraita for eating a birya. That's like doing a lav. And there's a Gemara I was going to say about ants, about ground up ants. And if you eat a kazayat of ground up ants plus an ant, a whole ant there, then you get one lot whipping for the kazayat and another whipping for the actual ant. For the whole ant. Actually, it says 6 or 7. I didn't go through the whole calculation.
6 goes 5.
Right, and the Taz talks about this, right? That the Tirabanan extension of Eno Batel is just a logical deduction from the fact that
Right.
there's chashivut to having Malkot assigned to it, right? It's clearly this is something really bad. So, why wouldn't we ignore
Exactly. The same way that the rabbis, I mean, there's different explanations of why, like on Pesach, why are we, as we see the Torah, one explanation is that we see the Torah is very makpid about Pesach, we can't even have it in your house. So the rabbis sort of take inferences from the Torah and create a rabbinic system, which is a reflection of the weights, of the various weights that the Torah seems to place on mitzvot. So we're going to put extra weight, extra precautions about birya because we see the Torah. But I'm asking a more basic question. Well, how do we know from the Torah that there is a din of birya? And you guys are saying, well, there isn't, but there is. So how do we know it from the Torah? According to Tosfos, I'm sorry to we see this in the words of what Tosfos is saying.
Milashon HaTosfot, it goes back to like the wording on
We lost you.
Kazait. It infers that Kazait is not a category here. It is the bird or the Isur substance itself.
Because what?
That's the Isur of the Torah.
Right.
Achila is Kazait. Achila is Kazait.
Exactly. In other words, there isn't like really a din of birya. It's that the Torah said, don't eat.
The criteria, the bigger definition of the achila of the bird.
Because we created a logical abstraction from the fact that the Torah saying, don't eat a bird. Don't eat a gida nashe. So from that we learn there's a death of birya. What does the Torah mean? What does the Torah mean when it says don't eat a bird? It means don't eat a bird in any size. What? So what do we call that? We'll call that birya. It's a whole thing. Don't eat a bird in any size. It said don't eat. If it would have said don't eat a wheat that's tevel, then that would have also taught us that's a birya. So there's no a priori concept of birya, which we are then applying to the Torah. The Torah is just saying a bunch of cases where you can't eat the whole thing, no matter what the size is. And so then we make the abstraction and say, oh, we'll call that birya. But the Torah is just saying, don't eat this whole thing, don't eat that whole thing, and don't eat. So there is a din of birya in the Torah because it's saying don't eat a whole Aver Menachai, don't eat a whole namala, a whole sheretz. And it didn't specify, and that we learned from that.
We could maybe even say the opposite. That, like classically, the din of kazait is because it has chashivut, even though it's not whole. But when the Torah said not to eat something, it meant that something. Like, how can I know? Like the whole
no, but by nevela,
our whole thought,
the Torah said don't eat nevela, but it didn't say don't eat a thing which has become nevela. It didn't say don't. I mean, a sheep would be hard to have an example, but don't eat a tiny bird that's a nevela. If it had said that, well, then that bird would have been also a birya, but it didn't say that. It said don't eat nevela, which is a general kind of and then we say, well, what is called eating? We know what a nevela is, what's called eating. So the rabbis came up, halacha l'Moshe Sinai, they came up with the din of a shiur of being kazayat. That's a halacha l'Moshe Sinai. So it's also deraita, but it's not explicitly in the Torah. But
Sure,
that's like when there's general eating, we apply kazayat, and when there's particular prohibition on eating a thing, then we don't apply kazayat, and we say, well, what do we apply? We apply any size. Reuben,
I was just making sure I understand, because like you're using the birya as a rabbinical construct that we then apply to certain dinim in the Torah, or are you saying that there's a concept of birya in the Torah itself? Because the way I understood it is that the Rabbaim, whatever, took a bunch of Isrim that looked the same and created a category that's called birya.
well,
and then
like I said, the Torah
based on
never
that,
says,
they like
in other words, like this. What I want, the category, it's just like the conceptualization is a rabbinic conceptualization, but that doesn't mean to say that there isn't things in the Torah that are prohibited because which now the conceptualization applies to.
right. That's how you're able to categorize it, because there's like a common element to all of these Surim.
It's just like malacha. It's just like malacha on Shabbat. The Torah just says, don't do malacha. And when the rabbis create 39 categories of malacha, that's a conceptualization that they apply, but it doesn't mean that those are not Torah categories. It's not really just the same. I don't want to keep that. Actually, that example I just thought of now, and it may be very different. But my point is, there is a prohibition of birya. It's just not called birya.
Right, so there's a common thread along all the Yisurim and Rabbanim. They say to put it in one legal category that they call
exactly
entitled birya. Okay, perfect.
Yeah, it's like case law. It's like we have cases, and then we say, well, what's in? We say, well, all these cases are actually birya, but the Tosfos is not trying to find a common thread among them, except for one common thread, which is that the Torah said don't eat them. In other words, he's not coming along and saying because if you cut it in half, its name it doesn't go away, or because it's a lot. In other words, he's not interested in trying to figure out why the Torah prohibited these things. He's just saying the Torah prohibited these things, and these things are prohibited to the extent that even a birya of them would be prohibited. And that's it. We have whatever the Torah listed is what's usher, and whatever the Torah didn't list is not a birya. And there's no common thread other than that they're all whole. Let's say they're all whole things. So wait, let's go. Yeah, Alan.
I was just going to say, Rav Nachum, maybe you could actually read in this Ein Shema Uchal into the Torah itself, based on the distinction that you made, right? Nevela is an adjective. No matter how much I cut up Nevela chunks, they're still going to have the adjective Nevela attached to them. But in Oftameh, it's a noun. And so the noun that you pointed out corresponds to the later language that the rabbis come up with, the Ein Shema Uchal.
Yeah, it's kind of like that. You're right. In other words, right. There was Tosfos is giving us like kind of an examples, and the later rabbis, the other later Rishonim, you sort of are paraphrasing Tosfot, or are sort of giving a rule of thumb to create what Tosfos, to get to the same point that Tosfos is getting to. You're right, by saying the Ein Shmo Alav is similar to the way is trying to sort of finding a common thread among them. But you're right. It's all sort of. That's what I started off by saying, is that everything is actually in this Tosfot. So let's go on. So he compares it to Mefarish, right? That it's as though a person. It's like the Torah was Mefarish. The Torah came and said, "This thing is Aser," in any amount. So he says, Mishane Mefarish Nami Kibiria Dami. That's what the Gemara says. And then he goes on, Mashma Ditama Debiria Have Ki'ilu Pirish Akatuv Shelo Tochal Ben Gadol Ben Katan. It's as though the Torah said, don't eat it, whether it's big or whether it's small. So that's the concept of Biria. That's what we would call Biria. You don't eat it whatever size it is, if as long as it's whole. Vim Tomar Ditnan Beperach Eluhen Halokin in Makot Kama Yochal Mina Tevel V'yeh Chayav. Rabbi Shimon Omer B'Kolshu. Rabbi Shimon says any amount of Tevel. V'Chachamim Omrim B'Kazayit. You know you need a Kazayit. Amar Lehen Rabbi Shimon Iyatamodim Ba'ochel Namala Kolshu Chayiv. Wouldn't you agree that eating a Namala is usher? Because again, the Torah says don't eat a sheretz. Amar lo mipnei shehi ki briata. It's because it's like it was in its created form. In other words, it's whole, kind of. Amar lahen afchita ki briata. Also, brita is in its created form. It's a whole piece of wheat. Umasik b'Gemara, and the Gemara concludes the Rabbi Shimon kol shehu limkot afilu kemach. Rabbi Shimon actually, in the conclusion later in the Gemara, it holds that even kemach you'd be chayiv on any amount. You're eating tevel, so he would hold even if it's not a birya, even if it's not a whole thing, you'd be chayiv. So why was he saying a whole grain of wheat? If he doesn't hold that, he holds that even flour you'd be chayiv. He was talking according to the rabbis. The rabbis who say you need a whole thing, he was speaking according to there. You, rabbi, should agree to me. You should agree with me that one piece of wheat is like its creation, and that it should be b'kol shehu. V'Rabbanan briat neshama chashiv. V'Rabbanan briat neshama chashiva. And the rabbis sort of answer him, or they consider only things that have a soul, that are alive. Dechita lo chashiva. But a wheat they don't consider as a birya because it's not alive. Vahashta kasha. And now you can ask a kasha. So that means that the rabbi seems to hold that it has to be a living thing. So then he goes on, that's a kasha, because what about gid, ve'ever min achai, which are dead pieces of an animal? In other words, the gid itself is dead, and the ever min achai is itself dead.
I don't think it's that it's like the issue is that it's dead. The issue is that it was like it's not a living.
Yeah, well, okay.
And it's not a living
never-
creature, it's a tendon, right?
tendon.
Like
It's not a living creature. In other words, it's not alive. It doesn't have this thing called that it has to be alive, right? That's what they said. It said, "V'Rabbanan briat neshama chashiva." A gid doesn't have its own neshama. A gid is sort of part of the neshama of the animal, and Aver Menachai doesn't have its own neshama. So how come gid a nashe and Aver Menachai are in fact biriyas? The chashiva birya alma lo talia milta b'neshama. You see that it's irrelevant whether it's alive or not, whether it's part of whether it was a whole living thing. So when they answered Rabbi Shitwell, Vafilu have neshama b'chita, and even if there would be a soul in a piece of wheat, lo chashiva birya, we wouldn't consider it a birya, could have perished, like I explained, because what does he mean could have perished? Like I explained, because it's tevel that's usher. The Torah didn't say you can't eat a grain of wheat, which is tevel. It said you can't eat tevel. And so then we have to say, well, how much of tevel? So we have to come up with the shiurim that Moshe got at Sinai of a kazai. The lodami lemefarish, and in that case, it's not like the Torah said don't eat. It's not dami lemefarish. It's not like the guy who made a shavua beferush. He's not going to eat any amount. The Torah didn't say don't eat any amount of tevel. It said don't eat tevel. The lo dami lemefarish. The lo tochal tevel kativ. It just says don't eat tevel. V'lo kativ lo tochal chita shel tevel. It doesn't say don't eat a grain of tevel. So we are left with the question: why is it that Gira Nashe and Aver Menachai, even though they don't have a neshama, or it seems like the neshama is irrelevant? So why did they say actually to Rabbi Shimon that you need a neshama? V'nira the Mefarish to Rabbanan ledivrei Rabbi Shimon kamahadrele. They were just answering up for him. They were just trying to push him off, saying, "For you who seem to." We can tell you that it's sort of strange because they don't hold it and he doesn't hold it. He doesn't hold you need a neshama because he holds even kemach, and they don't hold it because they hold even get a nashe. But they were just saying it to maybe to push him off.
I mean, the best way to make an argument against somebody is to use their own reasoning against them, which is what the Rabbanan are doing to.
Yeah, but they're not really using his own reasoning because he holds that kemach is birya. Kemach is chayv.
But they're saying
but birya. But they said to him,
yeah.
They said to him, in other words, they said to him, his interpretation of them was that they held that it had to be a whole thing. And he says, well, wheat is a whole thing. He says, according to your understanding of us, we should hold that it's alive. It doesn't really quite fit. And that's what Tosfos is bothered by, actually. Rabbi Shimon kama hadre le ledidan. He just answered, wait. L'divrei Rabbi Shimon kama hadre le ledidan, because they're just answering according to him. Ledidan afilu have a chita neshama, because we hold that even if a chita would have a neshama, lo chashiv le birya, it doesn't have birya, it wouldn't be considered a birya. The lo dami lemefarish, because of this other reason, it's not dami lemefarish. So in other words, Tosfos is going back to his original opinion. It has to be anything the Torah specifically is mefarish, don't eat that thing. That's what is a birya. Kidduperished, like I explained above. Ela ledidan, ela ledidcha, dechashavta le birya, that you thought a wheat could be birya. Alma leislecha taima de mefarish. In other words, you hold that tevel could be Aser in Iberia, which means that you don't hold like us. You don't hold it. It needs to be mefarish. So according to you, we'll say, then according to you, well, it has to be only living things. Mekom makom lo dami namala. You can't bring me an example from a namala. You can't. That was his kasha, right? His kasha was an ant. He says, but I'll make a distinction. Your ant example is not a proof against me because that's a living thing. This is not a living thing. Fine. Because the namala ikka neshama, it has a soul. So I want to skip, because let's just skip a little bit, and then he says, after where in the Tosfos is a quote, Daf Yud Zayin Amud Aleph. There's a place where it says Umi Dochek Hashas. You see that? It's like about, I don't know, towards the. I skipped not too much. I skipped like. From what's left, I went about halfway. You see it? Yeah. So it says, Umi dochek hashas lomar de Rabbanan meshivim tshuva le Rabbi Shimon ledivarav. And what forced the Shas to say that they're answering Rabbi Shimon according to his words? Masha eno sovrim, what they themselves don't hold. Kevan de eno lo b'mishna v'lo b'braita. In other words, this idea that they invented, that it has to be alive, is no Mishnah, no Braita. Why did they make up this teretz to push him off? V'im tomar v'Rebbe Shimon de Chashiv chita biria hek truma ole b'kuf aleph ha'amrin and lekaman de biria lo batla gabe gid v'kit. All right. This is really what I want. V'ki tema hatam hainu taima de kishenolad nolad ha'isr imo komogid. And if you want to say this other teretz, that it's born, it has to be born with the isser on it. In other words, it has to be born in a state of isser. Like a gid anashe, when it's created, is a gid anashe, so it's always aser. And a of tameh is created, it's always aser. V'shratzim ve'ever menachai. V'ofot tmeim, aval truma mutter ad sheyam reach. But truma, in other words, wheat is not called tevel until you make a pile of it. So it's actually born in heter. In other words, wheat only becomes chayav in truma when you make a pile out of it. When it's not piled up, it's not aser, and therefore it's not born with it's Isser. So maybe that's a good distinction. And then he says, Akati, but then I have a kash on you. Orla v'kilaya kerem lo libatla. Then you should logically say that Orla and kilaya kerem shouldn't be batal. They should be a biria. Because Orla and kilaya kerem are always us, right? Orla is the first 3 years of a tree. It's orla, and it's born that way. The fruits are born that way. The fruits are born in Isser. And also, kilaya kerem, once you have once it's planted in a forbidden way, any fruits that come out are born Usser. So why wouldn't they be us? So he's rejecting this idea that it has to be born that way, which is kind of what Rashi has said. And he's going back to his own thing, because kilaya kerem is not specific, that's an adjective. Like I said, it's an adjective. It's not saying don't eat a grain of kilaya kerem or don't eat a grain of so he sticks to his opinion. And he rejects other attempts. And he says that you don't need life and you don't need that it's born with it. All you need is my one category, that the Torah is mifarish. Questions? Sarah? Or Ruben? Ruben, Sarah, go, one of you.
I think Sarah was first, so I go for it.
Oh, thanks. I was just okay. This is this kasha that's been bothering me throughout this. Is okay. You have a kosher, like you have a kosher bird, right? And the kosher bird is born, and once it's alive, it's asur to eat it because it's ever minachai.
Well,
and it's only when you shecht it that it becomes mutter to eat it.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying, right?
So that doesn't seem to fit the pattern.
No, it's not really. So here's my answer for it. I thought of the same question. Joel, you want to say something?
I would actually make the opposite claim. I would make the claim that it's kosher until you ruin it when you don't do shlita right. I think is the way that they look at this.
But don't you have to? Isn't it like? Don't we have to like prove that the shlita is correct by like looking at the simanim and whatever?
No, but it's born in a state of potential. It is potentially forbidden and potentially permitted, as opposed to an of tameh, which is not born in a state of potential. It is born in a state of absolute. It is absolutely forbidden. It'll never have a way to become mutter. In other words, again, a kosher chicken is not usser or mutter. It has to go. It is not yet ready. It has a state of, it's in potential. It could become usser, in other words, it's true. It has to go through some states. Also, it has to be salted. It has to have lots of things.
But like once it's outside, once it's alive, like once it, like just take a cow, right? Like once it's alive, it's like out in the world, like sufficiently, whatever. There's some metric for that. Then like you can't eat it. It's ever minachai. It's asur.
Yeah, and Tosfot last answer actually seems to be like Sarah does.
But I'm trying to explain, right? Isn't it Rashi who says You're really asking Kasha and Rashi, right?
Yeah.
What did Rashi say? Kishenivret lo haya aleh Hashem nevela. That's the way he says it. It's true. In other words, when a chicken is born, it's not called a nevela. It's called a chicken. So the isser that you're applying, you're saying it's usher to eat. Why is it usher to eat? Because Eivir Menachai. Well, if you would eat it in a state of Eivir Menachai, then it actually would be a birya.
Right.
But then it would be a birya. But it's so that is nolad with it, and that is Eivir Menachai, says Rashi. But as far as the category of nevela, that only happens later when it actually, like Joel said, became nevela. So it's actually living, the bird is living in several states. It's, in other words, it's living in potential nevela, potential kosher, current Ever Menachai. So if you eat it well,
right. That's where like the linguistic explanation feels like much more solid than the like nolad bi-isur or whatever, right? Or it's created with isur. Right. That's different than just saying, well, sometimes it's called this and sometimes it isn't.
I don't like calling it what Tosfos is saying. I don't want to, I did say noun and adjective. And that's what's behind what Tosfos is saying. But really what Tosfos is saying, he never says those words. What Tosfos is really saying is just, did the Torah specify this thing as being an usher thing? Right? As opposed to nevela, which is not an usher thing. It's an usher adjective.
I think it's also important for us to remember that, like, at the end here, Tosfos is specifically like speaking Lefi Shitat Rabbi Shimon, right? That like this kashi at the end is not arriving at the Tosfos' ultimate stance, right? The kashi at the end that you read about, like the Orla and Kilei Kerem, is for Rabbi Shimon, who says that Tevel can be like a birya, right? That like that's Tosfos do end up thinking that according to the Rabbanan, according to how we hold, there are other standards for birya. He's just saying that we have a kasha on Rabbi Shimon, and we can't say that for Rabbi Shimon. It's only the things that are like.
I'm not sure that's right. I think that it's because of the presence of this language in the Gemara is a problem for the Tosfos explanation of what Bria means, regardless of like.
There's a lot of Rishonim see the Gemara differently. They see the Gemara as saying you need to be alive. That's what the Gemara seems to say. And Tosfos is trying to I think he's trying to defend his reading that you don't need that criteria. That's what I think.
I think the end is just them saying this is a kashya vis-a-vis Rabbi Shimon, but I don't think it's arriving necessarily at the definition of birya.
I think he's saying that doesn't do us any good. I think that's what he's saying at the end. He's saying that adding life as a criteria doesn't do us any good because still Orla and Kilei Kerem, No,
adding life does us good, right? Isn't that the whole point, right? Orla and Kilei Kerem is difficult for Rabbi Shimon, who doesn't require life. And it's difficult to explain how he would distinguish between these different ones, right? Because like...
But he doesn't distinguish between those different ones. He allows them all.
I know.
Right, but it's been like... If he thinks that Orla and Kilei Kerem are not difficult for us if we
hold by like Birat Neshama, right? We don't have to worry about the distinguish because like, it makes sense that Orla and Kilei Kerem aren't biryas because.
But in the Gemara, Birat Neshama is what it uses to defend the Rabbanan's position. Not...
Exactly. It's Kilo the Rabbanan are saying we require Birat Neshama, and Tosfos is saying the rabbis don't really mean that because they don't need that category because. They have a different category. They have a different way of thinking about it. They think about it, whatever the Torah prohibited as a noun, whatever objects the Torah specifically prohibited, those are biryas. And since happens to be all those things that are not alive are not, because he believes that Gira Nashe is not alive. So the rabbis do not, and yet Gira Nashe is a birya. So the rabbis must not hold that it needs to be alive. Because Gira Nashe is not alive. And he never says what other Mefarshim say, which is that, no, Gira Nashe is alive. He says Gira Nashe is not alive. So it doesn't have a soul. So therefore, you cannot have the category of it needs to have a soul, because Gira Nashe doesn't have. And therefore, it has a totally different take. It's whatever the Torah prohibited.
Isn't introducing a new category at the end, saying that Ishin Nolad Nolad Isur Imo? it's basically not that it needs an neshama. It's just like when it's born,
think-
the Isra is
sorry,
born
I think-
alongside.
I sort of misspoke. I think that new category is it's Rashi, and I think he's rejecting Rashi. That's what I think he's doing. He's saying that opinion of Rashi that it's nolad doesn't make sense because Orla is nolad also, and it's not a birya according to the Rabbanan. So he's sort of rejecting Rashi. That's the way I see it. Joel.
I do think, I think what makes this Tosfot so hard is that Tosfot's trying to do something different from everybody else, which is trying to come up with one general rule that this term is buried, where everyone else has to have several rules, right, to layer them on to each other, right? And in order to do that, they have to come up with this category of Mashe Piresha Torah, right, or Piresha, which is pretty hard to say because like you have to make it like a linguistic thing of what's a noun versus an adjective, right? I think the only way that works right now in my head is that Tosfot is claiming we have a tradition from Moshe at Sinai as to what cases the Torah was mefurash about and what cases it wasn't, or something like that. It's.
You could say he doesn't actually say that, but
yeah, they don't. Yeah,
no,
it's.
He makes this distinction, which is a very nice distinction. He just says the Torah doesn't say don't eat a grain of tevel. It says don't eat tevel.
Yeah, but nevela and trefa become difficult in that because the Torah does say don't eat nevela or trefa.
No, but it doesn't say don't eat a nevela.
No, the way he
animal.
distinguishes that is that he thinks like do not eat nevela. Like any kind of thing can be defined as nevela. A little piece can be defined as nevela. Whereas don't eat a gidanasha is thing.
Right. If the Torah would have said don't eat a nevela bird or a nevela animal, then in a kosher chicken that was less than a kazayit, that it was nevela would be asur birya, would be birya. But the Torah didn't say don't eat a nevela chicken. The Torah didn't say don't eat a nevela goat. It said don't eat a nevela. Well, what's a nevela? Nevela is not a thing. It's many things can be. In other words, I would even argue like this: if you ate a half a zayit of a nevela sheep and half a zayit of nevela chicken, you would have done this one isser called eating nevela. You ate a kazayit of nevela. They're all called nevela. It doesn't matter. They're from different animals.
Yeah, but couldn't you say something about ever mina chai at that point, right?
No, you took a dead piece of chicken. You went into the non-kosher supermarket and bought chicken and beef, and you took half a kazayit from each of them and ate it in one bite. So that's nevela. Both of them are nevela. You ate a kazayit of nevela. It doesn't matter. They're two different animals. You ate a kazayit of nevela. So you see, the Torah is not makpid on a thing called a nevela. It's makpid on anything that's nevela, that's in the category of nevela.
But you can say that about ever mina chai, right? You can say I ate half a kazayit of ever mina chai from this animal, half a kazayit from that animal.
But then you need a kazayit. But if I ate a half a bird that was less than, let's say the bird was was one kazayit, and I ate half of it, and then I took another bird. Whatever, no, it was less than a kazayit. It was let's say a bird was half a kazayit, and another bird was half a kazayit, and I ate two halves of those two birds. I would not be over because I didn't eat because it wouldn't say it's a bird. It's a whole thing. It's not a whole thing. It's half of this bird and half of that bird, and I didn't have a kazayit together because each of them together was only a half a kazayit.
I may not be getting the distinction, but I will step back from it for the moment because I actually think it's not such a good distinction.
What I'm pointing out is that Tosfos does gain one very strong thing, which is that he shows why birya is asur min Torah. Because he's saying it's because of the way the Torah prohibited it that we derive the law of birya. According to Rashi, why is birya asur? In other words, where does the Gemara, like I wrote on the thing, where does the Gemara know that there's an isur of birya? The Torah just says, they just threw out in the Malah. You agree with me about an ant. We never brought a Mishnah. We never brought, or maybe that's a Mishnah, but we never brought a Pasuk. Well, how do we know an ant is asur? Or according to Rashi, say it like that. According to Rashi, that it's notsar this way, then it's a nevela, then it's a birya. That it was born under the name of Isser, then it's a birya. How does Rashi know that? So you have to say, I think the answer is svara. It just makes sense to it. So that means that the din of birya is a svara, according to Rashi. And according to Tosfos, it's actually learned from it's a generalization from the various specific prohibitions in the Torah. It's a generalization that we make in our mind from specific isurim that we see. Maybe it's a subtle point. Maybe it's not. All right. We have 10 minutes to do the Ran and the Rosh. So let's look at the. Wait. Well, how can I? What I should have picked out. I sort of did pick out. Let's see. Well, here. So, who would like to read the Rosh? A little bit of the Rosh. Yeah, Aaron. All right, Aaron, go ahead.
V'hadigid mikre biria, beria. V'chein ever min achai, l'kaman daf kafbet, dag tameh b'of tameh. Aval lo of tahor mate. Da amar l'kaman b'hai pirka. Amar Rav, achal tzipor Torah, b'chaya b'chol shu b'meta tabikazai, v'thmea ben b'chaya b'meta tabikol shu. Piresh Rashi l'kaman, the nevela lo mikra biria, the lo haita nevela kshanatra. We've all seen this.
Right, we've seen this. Keep going.
אבל גיד ואף טמא ועבר מן החי, חל ישראל משעה שנוצרה. וקשה, הרי חלב המכסה את הקרב, וחלב הכליות, ועורלה וכלאי הקרם, דאסירים משעה בריאתן ובטלה. But there are a number of things that are asur from, as the Tosfot have noted, mishat briatan, and they do have bitul.
Right. Exactly. So in other words, what would Tosfos would say? The Torah didn't prohibit eating a particular nevel, a particular chalev, ela all chalev. Right. So these are the questions. V'yesh lomar. Now this is the same question that Tosfos. You're right. You're right, Aaron. The same question that Tosfos had basically.
V'yesh lomar d'chol davar she'im yechalek ein shmo alav nikra birya. Anything that if you cut it up, it does not have the same name. That would be a birya. Dav tameh shalem nikra of, ukshe'ein shalem ein klorinot of, ela chatichat of tameh. V'chen gid nikra chaticha gid. V'chein ever min achai. Aval nevela afil chatucha mikraya nevela. V'chol davar shenit nabel karui nevela ve'eno shem ha'etzem.
Oh, eno shem ha'etzem. So the way I explain Tosfos is actually exactly the same as Tosfos.
Yes.
I mean, if I'm right about the way I explain Tosfos. So go on. Now this is saying the idea of cutting it up in half is exactly the same as saying that it's a adjective, in other words, and versus a noun. Because when you have a thing, a book, you can have half a book, but red, it's still red if you cut it in half. V'ken shor, I think more examples.
V'chein shor niskal lo mikre birya k'nemuchach perk taravet. Right, so shor niskal is a problem because you would think that if you cut it up, it would be half a shor niskal. Mishum dichtiv lo yachal epesaro demashma fil chaticha achat mimena. And so there's also a pasuk that suggests that it's asur mashu, meaning that it does seem like it's birya. Aval hachak amar lo tochalotam ben gadol ben katan ki ashlemutan nikrein chen.
Wait, I think that pasuk is actually coming to answer the question rather than enforce the question. It's because like the basar is what's forbidden, not the shol, and because the basar is something that like if you cut it up, it's still called basar, therefore it doesn't count as a bria.
Right. It says exactly. It says lo yochal et basaro. It doesn't say lo yochal oto. If it said don't eat it, then I would say it's a birya. Don't eat the whole cow. Maybe a tiny cow of half a kazayit. It would be prohibited. But it doesn't say don't eat it. It says don't eat basaro. So basaro, how much of it's basar? What's called basar? Everything is called basar. So now we have to use our shirim of our shirim from Torah, from Moshe, from
right. So even when it's cut up, it is still shor niskal meat.
Yeah. The isser is lo yochal mi basaro. Don't eat its flesh, and so that's eating its flesh. So therefore, if it's cut up, it would still be usser, and then we don't know the shear, and we'll use the shirim from Halach l'Moshe Sinai.
Okay. Skip the gray.
Yeah, skip the gray. Go mashma. Yeah.
Mashma the Tama de Birya have Ki'ilu Piresh HaKatuv Lo Tochlena B'chol Shehu.
Oh, exactly like Tosfot. That's exactly the way I explain Tosfot. In other words, it's Ke'ilu. I like because he says the word Ke'ilu. Ke'ilu Piresh HaKatuv Lo Tochlenu B'chol Shehu. It's as though the Torah said, don't eat it in any size.
Behadat na beperk Elohim Elokin, Kama Yochal Min HaTevel Ve'echayav, Rabbi Shimon Omer B'chol Shehu V'chachamim Omrim B'kazayit. Amar Lahu Rabbi Shimon, Iyatem Modim B'ochel Namela Kol Shehu Shu Chayav, Amar Lo Mipnei Shehu Kabiriyata, Briyata. Amar Lahen Afchita Kabriyata, Umasi. Barabanan Biryat Neshama Chashiva, Chita La Chashiva. Haregi Be'ever Minachad.
It's the same part of the Tosos, right?
Yes.
He brings this story, and then they answer him that it has to have a soul. And they go on.
Haregi Neshama Minachad, La Biryat Neshama Hen, V'chashivi Birya.
So he says, so how could the rabbis say this? Begin Nashe is not a soul. Yesh Lomar.
Yesh Lomar the Rabbanan L'divrei Rabbi Shimon Ka'amre. L'didan afil havechit neshama lo mikraya birya. The hakativ lo tochal tevel v'lo kativ lo tochal chita. To have a mashma the ashlemu shachita kapid kra. Mo bahane the mikro birya. The damu l'mifrash.
So far, it's like mirroring the Tosos exactly.
El l'didach the chashav le birya. Alma leit l'chatama the mefarish. Mikomakom lo damli namala the hatam ikan neshama v'hachalek neshama. Gavna eshkechan tuva b'shavs the ka'amre tanai l'divrei chavreihem. V'afagav de'inu lo savre lahach svara.
Right. He says it's very normal to have it when the person gives an answer for your shita, not for my shita. Tosfos was actually troubled by this, and I skipped that part. But Tosfos felt that this is not normal, and I think that without getting into too much detail, without getting into any detail, I think that Tosfos says this is not the same as a normal case of l'shitatcha, because a l'shitatcha normally means I'm taking your shita what you have expressed and showing you how you're inconsistent. And here, or going according to your shita, but here it's actually a shita that he never even said. Rabbi Shimon never said it needs to be alive. But anyway, the Tosfos doesn't see it as a problem. Go on. I mean, the Rosh doesn't see it as a problem. Go on.
I think he's just now bringing other places where this.
But
this
so go to the
happens.
very end. Go to the last line. V'yesh mefarsh.
The afer banan ba'u davar sheba mebiryat neshama. V'giv ever minachai ba'im midavar sheyesh bo neshama. Right.
So here he just throws in this idea that we're going to see again.
Ra.
Now the Rosh adds in yesh mefarshim. There are those that say that the Rabbanin also require it to be alive. And why? They come from something that was alive. So he says that is called being alive. Right? So that's another alternative to just explain the Gemara. But you still don't need it, right? According to the way we explain, you still don't need that requirement. So Ron, wait. Since you read so fast, maybe you can read the Ron. You'll read it really fast too. We don't have to read all the Ron, but Aaron, you want to keep reading? Oh, so the Ron is later. It's like we've jumped in time. Each one of these is about 100 years after the other. So the Ron now says, you know what? There are three criteria. Now, what are the three criteria?
So it has to, it's similar to Rashi's criteria. It itself has to be Asur. From sort of ab initio. Hasheni shetahe biryat neshama, hashlishi shetahe shlema. Isur megufa ketzad.
Wait just a second. The shlishi here, that is sheteh shlema, is that arguing on the Rosh and the Tosfot?
Sorry, you froze for a second on my computer.
The third opinion, the third requirement that it has to be whole. Does that argue or disagree with the Tosfot or the Rosh? Joel says yes.
I don't think so.
I don't think so either. I think the Rosh didn't say it, and the Tosfos didn't say it, but it's totally obvious that birya is not a birya if it's not whole. If you cut an ant in half, it's obviously not a birya anymore. So in other words, that's not. I would say that his third criterion is not a chiddush. It's just like he's explicating something that was assumed all along. But anyway, all right, go on. So Isser Ketzah, yeah.
Isser Megufa Ketzah could go and get an Asher V'Kiyotze B'Shehu Aser Mitchila Briyato. So this is as Rashi said. אבל ציפור תורה וכיוצא בה שהיא מותרת אף על פי שנתנבלה, כיוון שדבר אחר גרם לה לאסר לביריה.
So I like the way he says it here, right? כיוון שדבר אחר גרם לה לאסר. Maybe this helps Sarah. I don't know. In other words, well, maybe it doesn't really help Sarah, but אף על פי שנתבלה, כיוון ש... In other words, the nevela is something that is external to it. It is not part of its essence. It happened to it, right? It became its kevansha davar. Some external factor caused it to become aser, because it was in a state, like I said, it was in this sort of state of potentially being mutter or aser, and then something happened to it, but it wasn't born in a state of absolute prohibition. That chicken that became a nevela.
Behind it, I'm reading the comment of Pirkin. Achalti portara b'chaya b'cholshu b'mitzvah b'kzai tmea ben b'chaya ben binsta b'kolshu. Behind the time b'titzi portara kevan shedavar acher garam l'leaser lo mikre birya lihitchayev ale.
All right, skip the two.
Tnai sheni dahainu biryat neshama ketzad kagon sipor ina megiran asher dehava bechiyuta.
Oh, wait, so what he changes the word here. Notice he changes the word here. He doesn't say briat neshama. He says dehave bechiyuta. It has in it a life force. It's not that it's a thing with a soul. It's not that it's a living organism, but it has in it chiyuta. It's very similar to what Tosos said what the Rosh said at the end. Shebaim midavar sheyesh bo neshama. It came from something that had a soul. It has, so we see a kind of development. In other words, this idea that the Rosh sort of threw into the Tosfot now becomes an actual requirement. And it doesn't, but it's not exactly like the Gemara said that it has to be alive, it has to have a soul, it has to have chiyut, it has to have life force in it. And it has to have had life force, really. And he puts in that category Gid Anashe, which the Tosfos felt was totally not in that category. Okay, and now and then he adds into go to the last line in 2 there.
Umihu chaylev lo mikre birya afal pishu birat neshama lefi she'ein kulam b'makom echad ve'eno ke'em birya shemikubetze ke'echad v'zeu t'nai sheni.
Yes, this is sort of weird because the T'nai Sheni actually is 2 T'naim, really. It's sort of weird when you read it. That's why I put these numbers in, because it looks like there's 4 T'naim here. So the T'nai Sheni has 2 things. It is that it's whole, that it's alive, and that it's, in one place. It has that's sort of, I guess you could say it's kind of connected to liveness. In other words, living organisms can't be spread out in a way that they're not connected.
Right. The Shulchan Aruch thinks that Chaylev is knocked out by right. He phrases it is knocked out by the third T'nai.
Right, and Shmachalav.
Or a slightly different version of a third
one
T'nai.
is not the third one is everybody agrees to. It's just that it's Shalem.
Right, but
yeah, it makes sense to put that together with the idea of it can't be spread out.
Right, though he combines this third T'nai with the Rosh and the Tosfot of it has to be Shalem and also it has to be
wait just a second. Let me just stop for a second. The Tosos and the Rosh basically have the same thing, and they're saying it's whatever the Torah prohibited, and that's it. The Ran is coming at it is really like Rashi. The Ran is really like Rashi, right? And he's defending Rashi, and he's saying that's the first Tanai is like Rashi, that it's Isser Megufo, it's born that way. And because he has some kashas, he has to come up with a second Tanai that it's that he has to adopt the life force, not like Tosos, not like the Rosh. And it has to have this life force in it. And he changes life force to be life force and not be. And then he also in life force, he puts in that that like all living beings, it has a certain bodiness to it. It has a certain organization. It can't be spread out like Chalev, which is sort of amorphous. And then it's Tanai Shlishi is just that you eat the whole thing. So what I want to say is that the Ran is really it's a kind of, I mean, it's really like Rashi, and it's like the Yesh Mefarshim that the Rosh was aware of, but did not agree to. So really, there's two schools of thought. I think there's the Rashi and the Ran, and there's the Tosfos and the Rosh. And the interesting question will be, well, how does the Shulchan Aruch paskin? And we'll see that after the break. So
Stay with us after the commercials.
Exactly. You want to read, Sarah?
Can you remind me where we were before the cliffhanger?
Oh, we're
Been a
moving
long
on
5 minutes.
to Shulchan Aruch.
You just want to read the Shulchan Aruch. Yeah, hold on one
Yeah, I
second.
just want to read the Shulchan Aruch. I'm no time for the Beis Yosef. I gave you basically by reading all those sources, we did a kind of we did the first paragraph of the Beis Yosef, but plus that Tosfot, which I think is very important. I really don't understand the truth is the Beis Yosef referred to some other Tosfosim. I don't know why he didn't refer to this one. Let's just go right to the Shulchan Aruch.
Great.
And
Bria.
the Hainu, yeah.
דהיינו כגון נמלה או עוף טמא וגיד הנשה ואיבר מן החי וביצה שיש בו אפרח וכיוצא בהם אפילו באלף לא בדלה ואין לו דין בריאה אלא אם כן הוא דבר שהיה בו חיות לאפוקי חיטה אחת של איסור וכן צריך שיהיה דבר שאסור מתחילת בריאתו לאפוקי עוף טהור שתתנבל ושור הנסגל, וכן צריך שיהיה דבר שלם, שאם יחלק אין שמו עליו, לאפוקי חלב, וכן צריך שיהיה שלם. הגה.
Wait, so who's he paskening? I mean, it's not paskening, because there's no different, nobody has an argument in din, really, as far as I know, as far as I understand at this point. But who is he like? Who does he sound like?
Well, he's only got basically 2 criteria instead of 3.
No, he has, really? I think he has 3. Or maybe 4.
Oh no, sorry. He has, yeah, okay. Can't count.
I think he's clear. Wait, Aaron, what do you want to say?
Oh, he seems to have the Ran's criteria plus the criteria of the Tosfot and the Rosh, which is how the Taz.
Yeah, because
right, it's that it has to be Asur Briato.
But that's Rashi.
Right,
that's the Ran's first criteria.
Yeah, I said the Ran plus the criteria of the Tosfot and the Rosh, right? Because he also adds that it has to have this. It has to it has to be something that when you cut it up, its name does not apply to.
Yeah, he basically adds the linguistic part.
But
he sort of subsumes it under another category, right?
Right. The Taz makes the point that the difference between V'chein tzarich sheyeh davar shalem, and then his repetition of V'chein tzarich sheyeh shalem.
Yeah, well, that's for sure. Exactly. Yeah. So, right, he sort of throws in the Rosh there. He throws in the Rosh. Not really. Tosfos didn't say that. That was really the Rosh who said it, even though it's like even though it's similar.
Wasn't it also the Tosfot who used the language? Don't they also say? I don't know. I think it's so or so. So it's not. I think
maybe my memory is not that great, but I thought the Tosfos didn't say about cutting in half.
I feel like the Tosfot has that thing about like.
I think the Tosfot also used the Shlemut argument. I think.
Well, and it also has that thing about like Tevel doesn't count because it doesn't say like don't eat one particular grain. It just says like Tevel in general, you can't eat it.
I disagree. I don't think he says, you'll have to show me later. I don't think Tosfos says that if you cut it, its name stays on it. I think that's the way that the Rosh tried to make sense of the Tosfot, tried to bring the Tosfos to a sort of sharper analysis, a sharper focus. But I don't think the Tosfos actually said that cutting it and its name is lost is a criteria. And in fact, the basis didn't quote this Tosfos, so it makes sense that he wouldn't be quoting the Tosfos now. But I think it's really the Rosh, but it doesn't. But again, it does seem kind of superfluous because, well, he didn't like, what does he get rid of? He get rid of Mekubatz, the Makom Echad. If he had just put the Mekubatz in Makom Echad, then he would have gotten rid of the Chalev. Then he would have gotten they would have been exactly like the Ran. I guess he didn't like that criteria so much. Did he say Mekubatz?
No.
No.
Right.
No,
So
but
he must not have
his
liked that criteria
definition-
because the Ran just sort of invented that.
Right, but the Beit Yosef's reading of Shalem includes the Ran's definition of Mikubatz, right? Because he's like, oh, Shalem means no Halev because it's from different places. So I think it's like,
I'm saying he got rid of
incorporated.
Chalev in a different way. He got rid of Chalev by using the Rosh's method of getting rid of Chalev.
I disagree. I think he's using the Rosh's terminology, but I think the Ran's concept still applies, right? Because the reason Halev isn't like Shalem is because it comes from different places, right? And it has to be Mekubatz mi Makom Echad, like, and it's not Shalem because it doesn't come from one place. Like that's the same logic, it's just different terminology.
No, but his key point is that Ein Shem Alav, that when you cut it, it loses its name. And Chalev doesn't lose its name when you cut it. It's nothing to do with the fact that it's spread out. It's just that the name is not lost when you cut it up. It's still called Chalev. It was Chalev before, it's Chalev after. So I see that as the Rosh. But okay, we can leave it. Here, so Sarah, just read the Ramah.
בעיקר גיל הנשה אינו אלא על הכף בלבד, והוא כרוחב ארבעות, ואם הוא שלם מקרה ביר.
Arba etzbaot. So it's very small. So it's very
It's just
strange.
like-
because here we have a birya that's like not a whole thing. It's kind of,
Tiny.
it's very weird. Let's go back. There's something that really bothers me. Go back to this Efroach. What is this Beitza sheyesh ba Efroach? That really bothers me. And I'm not alone. It bothers the Shach too. Well, why does it bother us? He said he threw in this thing, the Beitza sheyesh ba Efroach. We didn't talk much about that. The Rambam does. The Rambam actually mentions that a Beitza could be a birya. A Beitza sheyesh ba Efroach. Why it bothers me because, like, well, let's look at the Shach here. Sarah, can you read? Jump into the Shach bet, and just where he says, I'm going to sort of skip. He refers us to a lot of discussions about whether an egg with blood spot or not a blood spot. But look at this where it says Lefi Aniut Dati. It's a couple lines in.
ולפי עניות דעתי, דלא הווה בריה כגון שעדיין אין בו חיותה, וגם בביצת אפרח לא אשכחן דהווה בריה, ומן הספרה נראה דלא הווה בריה, דהי ביצה מתחילת בריאתה הייתה מותרת.
All right, stop.
So
in my
it seems
opinion, here I'll say, in my opinion, it's not a birya. What he's talking about actually is a one with a blood spot in it. An egg with a blood spot is not a birya. Kevan she'adayin ein b'chiyut, because it has no life. It never started living. V'gam b'beitza efroach, and certainly a beitza that has and oh no, not certainly, and even I said it right.
Even one that has an
even
efrog.
one that is got a live or a chick in it, a dead chick or whatever. Lo ashkechan da have birya. Where do we ever find a source that that's a birya? And so certainly not a one with an egg spot. With a blood spot also not, a blood spot not, and even one with a chick in it. Umina svara, and logically, nira de lo have birya. Why is this a birya? Because what isser is it? What isser is it? By the way, interesting question. Daha hai beitza mitchilat briata haita muteret. This egg, before it started growing, was certainly mutter as a egg. If the blood spot hadn't yet developed, and it was not an efroach, and even now it's sort of could potentially be mutter if it was come alive and be shechted. What is there, by the way, would there be in eating a chick, inside an egg with an efroach in it? I guess it's nevela, right? I would say it's nevela. It's not Ever Menachai. It's got to be nevela. I think
That's
actually I think when some Rosh Hashiva gave a whole hour lecture about this, what the Isser is. Some friend of mine was mentioning it to me. What Isser is it? And he came up with that it's sheretz. I don't know why it's sheretz, but that's some kind of. I wasn't at the shir. Wait, Joel.
No, I think this might be the nafkami between the Tosfot and the Ran, right? In the Ran, I mean, even though the Shach is opposing it here, in the Ran system, you can make Efrach work, and I don't think in the Tosfot you can make it work because it's not Mefurash B'Torah ever, right? Or if it is, it's a best nevela, right? Which is not a category of birya. So I think the Tosfot would reject this as birya.
The Tosfot would reject it because it was never prohibited in the Torah.
Exactly.
And the Ran would accept it because.
And I think you can make the Ran accept it, which is what they're doing here, right? But
why would the Ran accept it?
Well, if you claim it has all three of its categories, it has chayut, right? It's asur mitchilat briato, which not so clear, but let's pretend that's the case here, right? And it's definitely not called an efroch once you scramble it up anymore, right? So it's
right. Okay, so. Right. So exactly. So maybe the Ran would allow it. It's an interesting point. Anyway, the
But Joel, how are you getting around mitchilat briatan?
Oh, he said he's ignoring that.
No,
I know, but I'm saying.
No, I think you could say it's not an efroch until once it becomes
once it became an efroch, it was us. But it's again, it's an avela. It doesn't seem logical. I don't think it can fit any.
Well, by the way, Rav
Nachum, it's a sheretz then.
Also, but part of this
it's a sheretz, according to
if it's a sheretz, then it works. Yeah.
There's a debate. There is a debate, right, between the Beit Yosef and the Shach as to whether or not it's the efroch is the birya or the Beitzah is the birya. Right.
I don't even understand that. What does it mean the Beitzah is the birya? But the Beitzah
like the whole Beitzah with an efroch and it is a birya.
Oh, and once you lose the shell, then it's no longer a birya?
Or once you cut up the egg, at least, or something like that, versus the efroch itself. Right.
Anyway, so the Shach says that it's not logical. And then he goes on to say, but therefore, we're certainly not going to be frum about a blood spot. And we're not going to consider a blood spot to be a birya. But since everybody seems to say that this is a birya, and maybe the lashon of the Rambam seems to be that it's a birya, we'll call it a birya. But it's not so clear. He's not so happy with it. Just so let's. And by the way, we should really revisit that whole thing about 60 eggs and 61 eggs. Because I did a little research into it, and I think we did it a little bit wrong. I think that 61 egg, the Rambam holds, first of all, we always saw this because you need 61 because maybe one is bigger, one is smaller. First of all, if an egg is potentially a birya, then the whole thing, even in 60, should be forbidden. Even in 61, even in 1,000 should be forbidden. So Mapi told him that it was mutter in 61. So some of the Mefarshim say, it comes out, at least in my mind, that we're talking about a case, or even some of the Mefarshim say, the Shach goes into this in Siman Pei Vav. But it comes out that the egg is removed, and then you need 61. And we're only worried about the flavor of the egg, because it's a birya. The Rambam says, of course, he has a totally different reason why The Rambam makes a lot of sense, by the way. I'm surprised we didn't discuss this ever. But the Rambam says, you know why we need 61? Because an egg is a birya, the rabbis made an extra chumrah to have 61 instead of 60. Nothing to do with varying sizes. Just a chumrah because it's a birya. But it's a birya, so you have to remove it. And if you couldn't, I mean, it comes out according to the Rambam, and the Rambam doesn't say it explicitly, but it comes out that if it would be there, it would be Aser and Elif. Joel's taking offense because he taught this and he says we did discuss this. So just my bad memory. Okay.
If nothing, you said a minute ago that for the Shach assumes that a lot of people think that Beit Dam is a birya, but didn't the Beit Yosef say that there's it's not a birya? It's not an issue.
No, I said like this, that the Shach says that the Beit Yosef says he leaves it in a safek. He's mistapek about it, and he is mistapek. I found where he says that he's mistapek about that, the Beit Yosef, and the Shach is just saying if the Beit Yosef is mistapek about a blood, then we're not going to be machmir about that, but we are going to be machmir about a Beit Efroach. But a Beit with a blood spot, we're not going to call it a birya. That's the way I said it.
Thank you.
Okay, Bet. Sarah, or are you still here? Yeah, there, okay.
דבר שהוא ביריה שנתבשל עם ההיתר, אם אינו מכירו, הכל אסור, והרוטב בנותן טעם. ואם מכירו, זורקו והאחרים, והרוטב צריך שיהיה בהם 60 כנגדו, חוץ מגיד הנשה, שאין טעמו אסור, דאין בגדין בנותן טעם. אבל שמנו אוסר, וצריך 60 כנגדו להתיר הרוטב. לפיכך ירח שנתבשל עם גידו, אם מכירו, זורקו, וכל השאר מותר. ואם יש בו 60 כנגד שמנו, ואם אינו מכירו, כל החתיכות אסורות, ואם יש בקדרה 60 כנגד השומן, מותר הרוטב, ואם לאו אסור, ואם נימוח הגיד, ואינו ניכר, צריך גם כן 60 כנגדו.
All right, that was a mouthful. Can you?
Yeah. So okay, so you have a birya that has been cooked with heter. If you can't find it and take it out, then the whole thing is asur. If you can take it out, then you take it out, then you remove it, and then the remaining like sauce or whatever is binotain tam. So you need 60 again in the sauce, except for gid hanasha, because gid doesn't, at least according to Shulchan Aruch, for the moment doesn't have tam. But it does release some fat, and then that fat is asur, and so you need 60 against that. And if you cook the whole thigh with the gid in it,
wait. I don't know if the gid releases some fat. I would say a little
or
bit.
just like
there's fat nearby.
Yeah,
there's fat next to the gid, and it is prohibited. And if you're cooking a whole yerech with the gid in it, then it's also got the fat that's nearby. Because it's like it's adjacent to the gid.
Yeah, and so then presumably that's like sufficiently part of it that we're worried about it. Okay, so if you cook the whole thigh with that in, you can then remove the gid, and everything else is mutar if there is 60 against that fat.
Wait a second. Sorry, I lost you. Aval shamno asur. V'tzarich 60 kenegdo lahatir harotev.
Right, so
60 against the fat.
Against the fat.
To matir the rotev.
To matir the rotev, and then
even after you've removed the entire thigh with the gid.
No, so I think it's even after you've removed the gid. There's two cases, right? The first case is you're cooking the gid in some sauce. The second case is you're cooking the gid in the thigh.
Mm-hmm.
He's reasoning from one to the other, right? So he first tells you about the case with the gid just cooking in the stuff. Then he says, lefichach, if you cook it with the thigh with the gid in it, and then you pull the gid out, you can eat the rest of it as long as you have 60 against the fat.
Lefichach yerech nitbashel im gido im kiro zorko. I think he means throw out the whole thigh. You think you mean you just
You
cut
think
out?
he means
the-
throughout the whole thigh as opposed to cut out the gid?
That's what I think. Yeah, because you cooked it now with the fat in there, and yeah. He would have said motziat agid.
That im eno makiro kol hachatichot asurot. Okay, yeah.
And if you don't, v'im eno makiro, then you've got all these thighs in there, and
But you're gonna, I see.
all the
but-
thighs will be forbidden.
Because you're saying you have a whole thing of thighs in which one of them still has the gid, but
Yeah,
the
that's
other
what I'm
thighs
saying.
don't.
Yeah.
But wouldn't that have to be okay? Sure.
Wouldn't
It just seems like, I guess my initial assumption, which I think is now wrong, is that I would have to know more about anatomy than I do, but like that removing the gid would obviously make that one identifiable just because of like what you would have to do to it to like dissect it. But maybe that's not true.
Oh, I
I
see
don't
what you're
know.
saying. You're saying, how could it be that you can't tell which one it is? Maybe they cooked a long time and they started to fall
Maybe
apart.
they cooked a long time, but then that's already a different case, right? We have the nimuach hagid, ve'enu nikar, blah blah blah. So I don't know.
Uh-huh.
I don't know enough
Well,
about
that's exactly what I
that
guess.
of
It fell
animals.
apart a little bit, but it didn't. But it still didn't. But it's still enough of it together that it's not nimoch. It didn't dissolve.
Yeah. Right. Or right, like the thigh is together, but it's not recognizable. Like this is the one I cut into versus
Exactly.
the one I
The
didn't.
thigh on
I
the
guess
edges
is
of
the
the
idea.
thigh got all broken up, but it's still 6 thighs in there. It's still not turned into sauce. And then when he says the
Okay. So then the imyesh b'kedei rashishim keneged hashuman mutar harotev. Right. So if you have 60 against the fat,
so he's
then
saying
the
like this,
rotev is
even if you
mutar.
can't recognize it, you have to throw away all the giddim, but the rotev could be permitted if there's enough if there's enough
But
what?
once you've taken out the gid, don't you know which
In other
one
words,
has the gid?
you know one of them has a gid, and let's say there's 50 of them in there. So you're going to throw away all the 50. But if the 49 plus, you know that 49 of them are kosher. If the 49 plus the rotev is 60 against the one that was usser, then the rotev will be mutter. But all 50 will be usser.
All 49 are
all 49
yeah, all the
are
thighs
usser,
have to
plus
go.
the one is usser, right? So all 50 are usser. Because we don't know which one it is.
Right. Okay. And then if
And
the
we would have
if
said,
the
what would
gid
the din
like
be if it
dissolves,
wouldn't be Biria? Well, we generally
we would have just then it would have been batel
but in
itself,
what?
not
Well,
just
we
the
don't have
fat.
60. You know, batel in what? In what?
In 60. No.
In 60 of the whole thing?
Of the whole thing.
So that's what we're saying. So if there's 60, well, the dry pieces would be judged against each other, and they would be rove. And then you'd have to have 60 also. In other words, you'd have to have rove. You have to have 2 to 1, let's say. 2 ones without their gid and against 1 with the gid. It would be mutter already, as long as there was 60 in the whole pot. In other words, if you had a big
Yeah,
pot,
that's
the
what I
whole
meant by
pot-
60 in the whole thing.
You have 60 in the whole pot, but you also need to have at least 2 giddim against the 1 gid that has its gid and nash, against the 2 yereks against the 1 yerek that has the gid and nash. Okay, look at shach chet. Maybe Raphael, you want to read it?
Sure, just a second. Shachet.
Well, first of all, where are we talking about? Where is it going on? Shafchet is on
Siman bet. Sif bet.
Sif bet. He says, what's the case? It's Yerek Shenit
Kol hashar
Pashel.
mutar im.
No, go back. Yerek Shenit Pashel im Gidim, im Gido.
יש
You
לי
cooked
בשם
it
גידו,
with its
אם
gid in
מכירו
it.
זורקו.
If you know it, then throw it away. Because shar mutter.
וכל השאר מותר אם יש בו סמך כנגד שומנו.
Keneged the shamno of what? In other words,
Of
the
the gid.
sham, the fat that is in the gid that is asur rabbanan. That's not in the gid.
Because
That's in the
they're
yerek.
מגידים
Sorry.
בנותיתם, yeah.
That's in the yerek. I keep saying gid. The fat that's in the yerek, that's in the thigh, that's forbidden to rabbanan. You have to have 60 against it. Okay, so on that the shach says het. The kol shar.
וכל שאר מותר אם יש בו שישים כנגד שמנו, ואם יש בקטריה סמך נגד השומן. וקשה דאח סתם כדברי הרב, כדברי
איך סתם הרב?
איך סתם הרב
Who's the Rav?
הרב שולחן אורוך.
No. I think he means the Rama. It means the Rama. When he says Satam Harav, he means how come the Rama didn't interject an opinion here? How come he didn't jump up and say, I disagree? That's his question. This is a very fine and dandy according to the Shulchan Aruch, but not according to the Rama. So that's his question. So read again.
Kasha. Kasha deach satam harav kedivri ha titvav.
Atur.
Atur. Atur v'mechaber.
How did the Rama be quiet and agree with the Tur and the Mechaber?
וכן בתורת החטאת, דרמז בוקרן סובייטר, וכלל ממלא העתיק בסתם לשון הטור, וכן בעטרת זהב, וזה אינו, אלא לדעת הטור דסביר עלי, לא אמרין חנן בשאר איסורים.
Oh, here we go. Our favorite topic, coming back to haunt us. Hanan, we didn't think about Hanan over here.
This is only applicable to לדעת הטור, if we say that there's no Hanan. But we know that the Asarima in Rishon Ashkenaz,
why should there be? What's the Hanan? Explain to me why Hanan would cause a problem here.
Because the fact that you cooked the yerech with the gid made the whole yerech become a sort of gid anasheh, a big gid anasheh.
Or with the fat, let's say with the fat of with the shumana gid. Joel?
Shumana gid, yeah.
I think you can't make sense of it without the next sentence that also with Isur Davuk, right? Because if you cook everything together, then you can get away with it, right? But if
okay, you're right. So yes, thank you. So read on.
Just a second. וכן לא אמרינן באיסור דבוק דנוי סנתם, כמו שכתב בסימן עין ב'
וכן אמרינן באיסור דבוק דנעשה נבלה.
דנעשה נבלה, yeah. There is no Hanan there, דנעשה נבלה. כמו שכתב בסימן ב' סימן ט"ו.
So wait a second, I want to talk a minute about Isur Davuk. Isur Davuk says like this. It says, if I throw in let's say our case, a gid anasheh, a yerech, with a piece of forbidden fat, how do you say, biologically connected to it, born together, grown is one piece. So it's davuk. So the yerech is mutter, but the fat that's stuck on it is aser. So now I throw it into the pot, and I can say, well, the only thing that's aser is the fat. So the fat, I should have 60 against the fat. Isur Davuk comes along and says, no. Even though you threw it all in the pot at the same moment, because the fat is stuck to the side of the yerek, we view it as a two-stage process. And we say the thigh became forbidden because of the fat, and now you need 60 against the fat and the thigh, against that whole mass that you threw in. That's called Isur Davuk. And why are we saying you only need 60 against the fat? You should need 60 against the yerek and the fat.
Rav Nachum, so you're saying that Isur Davuk assumes Hanan.
Yeah, Isur Davuk is assumes Hanan. It's a special case of Hanan. It's a special case of Hanan where, as normally we say Hanan where, like, yesterday some blood fell onto a piece of meat and then the meat became aser. And now the meat today falls into something else, so we need to bevatel the whole meat and not just the blood. But Isur Davuk says even if it happens at the same moment, we can pretend that it's two separate events. Because it's davuk, because the fat is stuck to the meat, it permeates the meat before it spreads out into the rest of the pot, and therefore makes the piece of meat totally forbidden, and now we have Hanan. So he doesn't understand the Mechaber, or he doesn't understand why the Rama was quiet here.
Here and in Torah Chatat, meaning it's it's not an editorial problem. It is a kushiyah mautit b'dat harema. How is it consistent with that harema? You could say that he didn't write it here because he didn't find it so essential.
Okay, good. Right.
כמו שכתב בסימן ע"ב, סעיף קטן ט"ו, אבל לדין דקאי מלן לעיל סימן ע"ב וע"ג וכמה דוכתי, דאף בשאר איסורים באיסור דבוק צריך סמך נגד כל הנבילה שהאיסור דבוק בא, אין בחתיכה עצמה סמך לבטל האיסור, אם אין, צריך סמך נגד כל החתיכה, איסור דבוק, אם אין בחתיכה עצמה סמך לבטל האיסור.
Right. In other words, if, of course, if the fat would be so small that the yerech, that the thigh itself would have 60 against the fat, then we wouldn't have a problem. But you can't start assuming that here. In other words, in a normal case, or at least you should specify it. In a normal case, there's not going to be 60 in the thigh. So you have Isur Davuk, the whole thigh should become Asur.
אם כן, החינם היא ירך שנסבע שלם גידו. אין השאר מותר, דכיוון בהם בירך עצמה נגד שמנו, עד שיהיה בסמך נגד כל הירך.
Right, you need to have 60 against the whole yerech.
Yes, it doesn't add up. Like, if we subtract the fat, that is also assuming the Rabbanan, you stay with a very lean yerech that it's not able to mevatel ha'isur.
Right. And now you should have to have in the pot not 60 times the fat, but 60 times the yerech. And the Ramah didn't say anything. Go ahead.
ואדרבה, פויסקים או הציעו דין זה דאיסור דבוק ממאי דתנן יר שנתבשל בה גיד אנושה.
Oh, this is really a very important point here. V'adarabba. And he says even more so. The poskim that talk about Isser Hanan, they learn it from here. This is the classic case of Isser Davuk, fat stuck on meat. That is the case. So how can we not talk about it here? Where this is the case, where it's all learned from. The Hotzi din zeh, the Isser Davuk, Memai Tanan, Yerech. In other words, they brought out the din of Isser Davuk from here.
Just a second. אם יש בנוי סנתם, אסור.
וצריך לומר, skip to וצריך לומר.
וצריך לומר...
צדי למד.
וצריך לומר, דסמך עצמו על האל סימן ע"ב וע"ג ודוכתי טובה, והדי כתב את דברי התור, בסתם היינו משום דאפשר לדחוק ולפרש דרך שנתבע שלם גידו דקאמר, היינו שנתבע שלם גיד חתוך מן הירך, וירך בקדירה, ואוכל דמילתנקה. Meaning the Shach actually says that the Ramah doesn't think like the two, even though he didn't say that, because he already wrote it in Siman Bet Vayin Gimel, so he said he samach aleinu that we would recall that point.
So this is a very important point. When you open up the Shulchan Aruch and you see a din, it could be completely wrong. In other words, this section of this din is not the halacha, according to the Ashkenazi. And the Ramah and you say, well, how come the Ramah didn't say anything? He didn't help you out. The Shach helped you out. You cannot paskin from just reading the Shulchan Aruch. You cannot paskin the Shulchan Aruch. You have to read what he says everywhere. He assumes that the Ramah assumes that you know the whole section that deals with this. You have to know even earlier simanim. You should be knowing them. But that's part of his answer. Wait, again, v'tzrich lomar the samach atzmo. The hainu mishum the efshar litchot. What is efshar litchot? The farish the yerech shenit bashel im gido. What does it mean yerech that's cooked with its gido?
It's not dovuk. It's
hainu shenit bashel hagid chatuch min hayerech.
Yeah, it's like a situation that we got it from the butcher, the yerech and the gid side by side, and we simply put it in the pot.
Yeah. In other words, you could be dochak. You could force and say, in other words, the reason why he didn't feel he had to jump out here is because who says that the Ramah is talking, that the Machaber is talking about? And as he does agree, the Ramah does agree with this din. He agrees with it in a certain special case where they're separated and they're not davuk. Joel, you want to say something? Joel.
Well, I just want to say that it answers like Sarah's question of like how is it you can recognize it and get this thing out and so forth, and right is that I mean, you chopped it up before, you didn't chop up the geed, right, but you chopped up the meat into different pieces, right, and the geed was floating in there somewhere, you didn't recognize it, and at the end you recognize it, you throw it out. And
in other words, you took out the gid, you were a very good boy, and then you threw everything into the pot.
Exactly. Yeah. So
you threw the scraps into the pot, or by mistake. Okay. I just thought it's very interesting. I mean, I wanted to see that because it's a important concept to get under our belts, which is the Yisur Davuk, and always to know to apply it, in other case, in this case or in other cases. It's going to come up. It's like these other that's the thing that's interesting about this whole Tarovot, is that there's all these little factors. Oh, what about this? Oh, wait. There's some other factor. Wait, if you didn't take the gid out, maybe you didn't salt it. What about salting? There's all many factors that you could think about in any case. All right. Yeah, if you look in let me just read a little bit of Taz Hay. He just says like this: Imnimoach Hagid. He says Perush va'azile chashivuto. In other words, because it's Perush, what does it mean that it dissolved? Azile chashivuto. It no longer is chashuv. Chashivute debiria. It's no longer considered biria. Aval tzarich mikol makom samach negdo. You still need 60 against the gid, even though it dissolved. The afal gav the eitz ba'alma, even though it has no flavor, it's just a wood. A Torah asarto, the Torah forbids it. Umasik okay. So in other words, you still need 60 against the gid. Don't think that once it's dissolved, it's done. You don't have to worry about it. You still need 60 against it because even though it has no tam, it's still a chefetz of isser in your soup. So you're going to have 60 against it. Okay, Gimel. Sarah, can you read Gimel?
Yeah. Asur Hakol, right? In the Shach.
No. I mean Gimel.
Oh, in the Shulchan Aruch. Sorry, I don't. Okay. Kedera shel marak shenafal sham birya v'nevda asur Hakol.
Okay, what is that saying?
So you've got bowl of soup, big pot of soup, and the birya falls in, and then it gets sort of lost in the jumble. There's nothing you can do. That's all.
So let's turn back just to the tour.
The touring is like a more complicated story. No, the Beit Yosef is more like a complicated story.
So this is just saying what? Kedera sheyesh b'marak nafal sham birya, and you can't find it. It's all forbidden. Oh, wait. So what do you? Let's see. I'm going back to the tour. Kuf. So I just wanted to look in the Bach. Oh no, is it the Bach there? Wait a second. Yeah. Actually, I didn't get it. Yeah, well, wait a second. Sorry. Actually, I want to just look at this Bach just quickly. Bach Gimel. It's really not related. But I just want to look at this Bach Gimel. You see the Bach Gimel? It's a short little Bach there. And he brings this opinion that Birya could be batel in 1,000 or in 960. In 960 is 60 times what?
16.
Times 16.
That's 9.
So he says like this. He first of all, he brings it. There is a shear of 16. If you look in the middle of this, well, we could, I don't know, should we read it all? Here, Joel, you read this.
So it's the from the Zed dot. Okay, Gimel Yesharim de Birya Batla be 960. But Zeu dot Rabbeinu Shimshon v'chen katav be'arat Shari Dura b'shem Or Zarua v'chatav Marshal shetam zeh hu mipnei shemispar zeh ole. I'll say Ted Zayin. Why not? Pe'amim shishim. All right. Umispar shishasar hu shiur levatel bo k'di'itav manitin de trumot sir tameh batel ad sheishasrei. All right. Umispar shishim. So
16 is a shear that we know from Truma, from Trumot, that Sir Tameh is can be bottled in 16.
Yeah, it's talking about fish there, if I remember correctly. Is that right?
Yeah, fish brine can be bottled in 16. And Mispar Shishim, go ahead.
Vietnamese Rob B'Shela, right? And that we got from the Rob B'Shela, which we saw in Chulin.
And now here's the next line. This is the line I underlined.
Right, so we combine the two. Dematlim bo biyachad, right? Sheshesrei pamim, pamim shishim. Yeah, times 60.
Pamim shishim, 16 times 60.
Mevatlim bo afabiria ad kandato. So
ad kandato. So he's saying like this: we got these different shirim. If you put them all together, multiply them, then like it's like the Rav Landis always talks about how it's a pity that we went from some tasting to 60, and here we've sort of given holiness to the numbers. 60 is a holy number. 16 is a holy number. We see even Trumos. You multiply them together, you get 960. We can mevatel birya in that number because you have like all possible types of bittul combined, even though it makes no rational sense, except to point out that the whole reason it's not batel is because of din derabanan. So it could be the same mouth that forbid could be the mouth to permit, just like they forbid you birya, they could permit it.
Okay, so if we're trying to go all out on the birya, why not say that we're going to say it's 100 instead of shishim, and we say it's against 6,000?
Not 6,000, 960.
Yeah, no, that would be 1,600. Sorry, 100 times 16. Because with the Zoro B'Shelah, remember there was the debate.
Yeah, maybe
60
we would say
100. Well, why not be even more machmir and say okay, it's 100 times 16?
No, because we paskined already. We paskined that we don't follow 6. 100 is no longer a category anymore. That was offered as an opinion and it's been rejected. But the 16 has not been rejected, and the 60 has not been rejected. Anyway, we don't paskin like this, but it's just you should know that there's that opinion out there. Anyway. Let's do here, Sarah. Let's go back to the Shulchan Aruch, but keep your hand on that page. Keep your hand on that page because I want to come back there again. Let's do Dalet. And I'm sorry, I'm not doing justice to all of the Shachim and the Tazim. So read Dalet, Sarah, if you're still there.
ירקות מבושלות שנמצאו בהם 3 תולעים, הירקות אסורים, אבל מהשלקות מסננן ומותרים. וכן בשר יחרצו ויבדקו מותר. So you have some vegetables that you're cooking and you find 3 little bugs in them, then the vegetables themselves are asur, but you can, the liquid, the soup, whatever, the liquid, is mutar if you strain it, and then you can show that there are no bugs in it.
And also the meat.
And also meat, you can do a similar kind of.
You can rinse it off.
You can rinse it off, and then the bug's gone.
And the bugs
You
don't,
know
but
the
the
bug's gone.
vegetables you can't rinse off. Right? I mean, that's what he's implying.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it always bothered me because there's a the dot Adis Haredi, the most, the oldest or most from Heksher, puts their Heksher on canned parv cholent. It's the funniest thing. You can actually, I haven't seen it recently, but I have seen it in the past. Canned cholent. I haven't actually seen it in many years.
It is still available in Israeli supermarkets.
Okay. And it says that. So look at, you'll notice it says, Yesh livdok for harakim, check for bugs before eating. And this is against the Shulchan Aruch, because the Shulchan Aruch says you can't, once things have been cooked, you cannot check them. It's too late. If you had to check it before. And if you really think there are bugs there, then you can't eat it. Here, look at Yud Aleph in the Shach. Here, Alice, you can read before we go here.
Okay, I'm there. שלושה תולעים, דמאחר שנמצאו שלושה, הוחזק שיש שם אות, ואינן ניכרות, ועין בסימן פ"ד סעיף ט' ויש, okay, בעשרה מדינים אלו. So, because there is 3, so we can assume that there is more than 3, that there's much more, but we just don't see them.
Right, so like if you're cooking, I mean, actually, it's an interesting question. Like let's say you take a spoonful of sugar and you put it into your tea. And there were ants in the sugar. And now you see ants floating up in your tea. Well, I guess you could just strain it. But basically it's saying basically you just strain and pour out and take the ants out. But you might say, well, if it's something that can't be strained, I guess. I don't know exactly, like let's say it's like pea soup, and floated to the surface 3 ants, because maybe you put a sugar in your pea soup, and now you're gonna say, well, there's probably more, and I just can't find. The fact that I pulled out the 3 doesn't mean there aren't more. I pulled out the 3 that I saw, but there could be more. So actually, turn back. I promise you that you have to hold your page. Turn back to the Shulchan Aruch, to the tour, and look at the. I guess this is the Beis Yosef. Daled. Here, Alice, can you read that?
ומה שכתב,
No,
איזה
Daled
פירוש
is
אני לא-
Betshuvot Acheret. Betshuva
Okay.
Acheret.
So, and it's, wait, because I have it online, but
I think it's a Beit Yosef. It's hard for me to tell exactly in my version.
It's the very end
Yeah.
of the Beit Yosef.
It has a Daled in mind. It says Betshuva Acheret Katav Al Yirakot.
okay, so I have Dalet in a different,
So here,
but it's
also,
a different
so
text.
Alan, you want to? Oh,
Yeah, I can jump in, sure.
sorry, Ilana. Next time.
ובתשובה אחרת, כתב על ירקות, שאחר שנתבשלו, נמצאו בהם 3 תולעים, ירקות אסורים, שכיוון שהוחזקו ירקות אלו בתולעים, צריכים בדיקה, וכל שהם מבושלים אי אפשר לבדקם.
Like I said, you can't check cholent after it's been cooked. And you found 3, and there are probably more. Aval May, go ahead.
אבל מי השלקות מותרים, לפי שאסר לסננם. וכן אם בישלו בהם בשר, אפשר לרפות אותו, לבדוק עד כמה שנה.
Right. So that's exactly what he says here. It's pretty. That's Sif Dal. But I'm just pointing out that he's adding one more thing that you didn't see in the Shulchan Aruch, which is that because you can't check it. You say, well, what do you mean? It's muchzach. So keep looking. You'll just find them all, and you're done. We actually go by hazaka in bugs, and just
I thought that was true not just for. I thought that was true not just for the cooked. Is that only true for something that's been cooked?
No, the cooked is the point of that you can't check it.
What does it mean you can't check it? It says if you see it and one's
The fact that no, so if it's, let's say, rice and you're checking it and you find 3 bugs, I don't think you have to throw away all the rice. Just keep checking and take out all the bugs as you go, because rice is something you can check, but you can't check soup. So if you find 1 bug, let's learn the kula from this. If you find 1 bug, just take it out and you keep eating the soup. Who says there's anything more? Find 2 bugs, just take it out. Oh, once you find 3 bugs, then you have to say, we've got a hazaka here. There's probably more bugs and I can't keep eating it anymore because I can't find them. But something that's uncooked can be checked. Now, Joel, I think will want me to say my story.
No, actually, I wanted to point out 2 things, if that's okay. Can I?
Oh, yeah.
I'm over time. No, one is, there's a chazaka until then that you can that you don't, that it doesn't have bugs in it, right? At least according to this tshuva of the Rashba here that he's quoting. But no, but the Aruch HaShulchan, I'm not going to do it obviously, but he gets into a whole thing. He brings 3 reasons he thinks why his community isn't checking for bugs and things, because he's very bothered by it, but he wants to justify what they're doing at the same time. So it's just, I want to point people to it.
Why?
It's at the end of,
that's actually
the end of Siman Kuf in the Aruch HaShulchan. So I can send it out if people want. But
yeah, it's probably useful to see, because I think we're not necessarily any more frum than his community was. But let me just end with a story. I was once being a mashkiach kashrut in New York. Joel remembers this story, and the policy was sort of in the reverse. Check. We were making cabbage salad, and they said like this: check 3 cabbages. Cut them open or take out some leaves, some outer leaves. If you don't find any bugs, then you have a hazaka that all the cabbages are clean. Because it's like an industrial. We're checking lots of cabbages. We can't check them all. So just check 3 different heads of cabbage. If there's no bugs, then they're all okay. So this is the reverse, right? You understand that this is the reverse, because normally you'd say hazaka that you found 3, then it's usher, but now you say don't find 3, it's mutter. So you don't have to check. It kind of makes sense, because we're not saying we're saying we have hazaka, there aren't any. So one time, I never found any, except for once. I found a bug. So I called up the mashkiach, and I said, what should I do? I found one. He says, no problem. Just take another cabbage and check that, and use those as your 3. You create your hazaka based on a different set of 3. And I was like, oh, I could do that? Okay. I would never have thought of that. I could possibly do that. But he said that I could do that. So in other words, you're just trying to create a hazaka. And there's one aberrant, it's like a scientist who throws out data that's aberrant. If it's off the chart, then it just probably irrelevant data.
But if you originally had 3 and there was only bugs in 1, by the same logic, shouldn't that be fine? Because that's like finding 1 bug.
Yeah, exactly. Actually, I think he's actually. It sounds silly, but I think Isaac, you're 100% right. In other words,
but then you shouldn't have to check a second, third, like a 4th cabbage. You should be able to say, like, I went through 3, one of them was bad, I tossed it out.
I can't create a hazaka. I can't create a hazaka without 3. I only have 2. I can't say I have a hazaka, they're all clean, because I have a hazaka, in fact, that there's a mixture. So check them all. So I need to create a hazaka that they're all clean. So I need to have 3 clean ones. I can't create a hazaka with a mixture. I have to create a hazaka with 100% something. 100% bugs, 100% not bugs. Okay, well, I'm happy that we finished the Siman. I wasn't sure we were going to. So next week we'll do the next Siman. I'll send out sources. I'll be doing it also. Just because, just because I didn't assign anybody. But the following week I want to have some other people. Okay, Yishar Koach to everybody.
Thank you.
Sure.
Yeah, thank you.